was.
So Scotland face the greatest match in the distinguished history of Scottish football.
It was a fantastic experience. It was priceless, you know, your money couldn't buy it. And that applied to players a lot older than me.
Oh, Billy Bremner!
So many great players don't get anywhere near that. And you're lucky enough to be part of something like that.
Oh, what a save!
It was a group of players who gone well on and off the field. Maybe off the field going too well sometimes.
I don't honestly think that there was a better squad of players that Scotland ever put together for a competition.
No Scottish side has ever gone beyond the opening round of the World Cup.
It was a chance of a lifetime. I would say, looking back in my career, one of the best experiences of my football career.
Sandy Jardine, who's had the match of his life.
We felt that we were one of the best teams in the world at the time and were capable of winning the World Cup.
Back in the summer of 1974, an air of genuine anticipation swept across the nation as Scotland's footballers headed to the World Cup finals in West Germany. It's true. Younger viewers are going to find this hard to believe, but 30 years ago, a Scotland team were considered genuine challengers for the biggest prize in football. 2 years earlier, in 1972, when Lady Luck seemed not to be acting the twisted old witch she usually is with Scotland, Tommy Docherty had fired up the nation with back-to-back wins over Denmark, before announcing he was in love with another. He bailed out for Manchester United. The baton was handed to St Johnstone manager Willie Ormond, who dropped it spectacularly. His debut was the SFA Centenary International against England on February the 14th, 1973. A 5-0 gubbing. A St Valentine's Day massacre. It was shooty in for the English and the headline writers. In fact, Ormond's team won only one of their first 6 matches. It looked as if it would be easier for Scotland to put one man on the moon than 11 in West Germany.
The original team that Doc had put together was a great team. And as I said, Willie came in and obviously had his own ideas.
So for the next squad, things got changed about, and then that's when Willie started to put a stamp on the teams and the people he picked.
Ormond was under pressure. He needed a result, and it came. But from a highly unlikely source. In Scotland's World Cup section, the Danes enjoyed a wonderful night in Copenhagen, holding the group favourites Czechoslovakia to a shock draw. And suddenly, qualification was within Scotland's embrace. A win against Czechoslovakia at Hampden on the 26th of September 1973 would put the Scotland team in the World Cup finals. Scotland had never faced a bigger match. Willie Ormond had a few major calls to make. He pushed the gamble button. First, he brought the King back from exile. And alongside Denis Law's regal presence, he summoned Coventry winger Tommy Hutchison for his debut. Willie had gambled, and Hutchison's number came up.
To play for Scotland was like winning the lottery without buying a ticket. It took me ages to put the jersey on. I just looked at it, it was hanging up, and you're just looking at the number 11, and that you were going to be wearing it.
I always remember there was a fantastic crowd that night. I think it was about 140,000 at Hampden, full house, a night match.
I played in a cup final at Wembley, but it doesn't come anywhere near walking it at Hampden. And the pipe bands are playing as well, which makes it even better.
Scotland started the match well, but then a Czech called Nehoda scored a goal which blew poor Scotland goalie Ali Hunter into international football oblivion.
It's a good one, and it's a goal! And that's disaster for Scotland.
It's an unfortunate mistake with Ali Hunter, but you get the feeling in those days you were on the field that the crowd, as much as yourself, were lifting you to sort of get there.
The bigger the atmosphere, the better, really. And you just feel with the crowd that you can't lose.
The Hampden Roar. It was more like a lending library, but only briefly.
Holton's there and it's there! Holton scores! That's the one!
I think you'd a feeling even going behind you could equalise. There's sometimes you're a player in a game, you almost can sense, although you're behind, you're going to win that game.
One more goal. Just one more goal. That's all that stood between the Scots and football's promised land. Just one more goal.
Morgan flinging it across. Jordan is there! Jordan scores!
It was my first Scotland goal. That in itself made it a precious goal. To score a goal for your country against anybody is what you want to do.
I think between him scoring and the end of the game seemed to me like an eternity. It just seemed to... And you're always thinking, oh, I hope they don't score.
Referee looking at his watch. And that's it! That is it! Congratulations, Scotland. Well done, boys.
That night was the greatest feeling I've ever known. It was just unbelievable.
When we'd done it, it was just... never take those things away from you. Never.
Remember, we hadn't qualified for World Cup finals for quite some time, so that was a really big night in the Scottish calendar, and turned out one of the big nights in Scottish football in history. It was absolutely fantastic. It was a real sensational atmosphere.
The ovation we got after that game was sensational, because the fans then knew Scotland were going to the World Cup and the supporters were going to go along with us. And it was one of the most memorable nights of my football career. You know, that night we beat Czechoslovakia.
As the team were led on a lap of honour by Captain Billy Bremner, the nation celebrated. And celebrated. And celebrated. West Germany would be Scotland's first finals in 16 years. Could things get any better? Well, funnily enough, on the night Scotland lost the away game in Bratislava, they did get better. A whole lot better. That same night, England needed a win against Poland to make sure they were invited to the World Cup party alongside the Scots, who they'd recently thumped 5-0. After their own game, the Scottish team gathered round the TV back at the hotel to lend the English their support.
We were sitting down in the big lounge watching England versus Poland live as it came in, and obviously England didn't qualify.
We've got to admit it, there was one or two cheers from, not one or two, I think the whole squad let out a cheer, you know.
The Anglos were more so than the Danny McGrains, myself, and even Kenny at that time.
I would imagine little Billy going back to Leeds would have gave them almighty stick. He'd have loved it, him and Peter.
We nearly pushed it too far at certain times where in training, you know, there was one or two heavy tackles going in because we'd wound them up maybe too much at times.
England never qualified, Wales never qualified, and neither did Ireland, Northern Ireland or the Republic, so...
We had Germany all to ourselves, which was nice.
If you're going to make a splash, it's always better to dive in at the deep end. So the Scots began their preparations for West Germany by playing the hosts, and came within minutes of beating the current European champions and hot favourites for the World Cup. There was a swagger in the Scottish step. Students of our football history will know what happens next. We find ourselves treading in something rather unpleasant. And looking back at the spring of 1974, it was ever thus. In the home internationals, Scotland lost to Northern Ireland before winning against the Welsh on the Tuesday. So that meant a championship decider against dear old England, who had completed their World Cup preparations by buying a new colour telly and stocking up their fridges with beer. Scotland were in the finals, so it should have been plain sailing. Sailing, certainly. Plain, hardly. 4 days before the England game, the team went out for a light refreshment in Largs. And so began the tale of the wee man and the sea.
Well, the Jimmy Johnstone and the boat stories go down in Scottish folklore.
We'd beaten Wales, and we were allowed a night out basically.
And as usual, one drink leads to two, leads to three, leads to four.
I don't know when I left at about 4 o'clock or something.
And we were just walking along the seafront, and wee Jimmy Johnstone was there, Dennis Law was there, Joe Jordan.
Glad to say I wasn't there.
And wee Jimmy's a really good singer, and he was singing away, walking along the seafront. And for some reason he got in one of the wee rowing boats.
With no oars.
I just went up and I just gave a wee kick to the boat.
And the boat just drifted. And of course it went so quickly.
But Jimmy's still singing away, not got a care in the world.
Michael rowed the boat ashore and gave a sing.
Very soon they realised he was going further and further and out, and there was a little bit of a panic set into the squad.
So how are we going to get him in? So somebody had to phone the Coast Guard.
So eventually the Coast Guard bring Jimmy back.
And when he arrived, there was a lot of press there and things like that. And when they got him in, the famous comment was that, what were you doing out in the boat? He said, I was fishing.
Except the media weren't laughing. The headline writers couldn't see the funny side of those in peril in the sea, and they fired into the players in general, and Jimmy Johnson in particular. Willie Ormond was also slated for letting his team have a night on the town, to say nothing of the ocean, immediately before such a big game. The Firth of Clyde and a self-righteous Scottish press were a bad enough combination, but now there was an England team with a point to prove. Wounded by their World Cup exit, the three lions on the white shirt came to Hampden growling and menacingly desperate for Scottish blood. But see that Scottish team? It really was a mistake to wind them up.
And Shilton had to be so quick. Jordan! Yes! 1-0 to Scotland. Johnston. Played to Lorimer. Field for hands. It's right through! Johnston being congratulated. So too is Lorimer.
At the end of the game, the supporters were still in there and we did a wee lap of honour. And wee Jimmy was wanting us to go round to the press box and give everybody the wee sign because of the amount of abuse he had taken.
Johnston signalled possibly to the press box, but certainly in the direction in that area, and Willie Ormond looks up too.
Was he saying we won by 2 or was he saying, I don't know. But I think his best answer was how well he played, how well the team had played, and we got a great victory on the day.
That was a good result for us and it was a good result for Jimmy, obviously.
The best way to prepare beating England, have a good night out on the Tuesday.
The Scotland team's get it right up you to the press actually won the media over. Peace broke out when the entire World Cup squad was named as joint winners of the Scottish Football Writers' Player of the Year award. It was Scotland's summer of love, and like all great summers, it deserved a cracking soundtrack. Instead, we get this.
It's horrible. It's horrendous. I don't want to remember it. It's a nightmare.
It was supposed to be going on top of the pops and everything, and it must have been the worst record in the world. It was shocking.
Scotland would have to wait a further 8 years for a class World Cup song. Although when we awoke with a fever in June 1974, the sky was still darkest blue. Willie Ormond assembled a squad which was full of confidence, guys at the dawn of their careers and some at the dusk. The team captain was Billy Bremner of Leeds United, and he brought his crew with him. Jimmy Johnson swapped the boat for the plane this time. 6'2", eyes of blue, Big Jim Holton was a cult hero. Actually, whether they came from north or south of the border, all the squad were heroes to the fans. But Scotland were going into the big boys' playground. In West Germany, for the greatest show on earth, the Scots were grouped with world champions Brazil, Yugoslavia, and what were perceived to be the group's whipping boys, Zaire. And then there was the Tartan Army. Before then they were just fans in tartan bonnets and scarves, but slowly they were gaining official recognition as a regiment. Their specialist manoeuvre? Having a good time. They were world class at it. Scotland tried to relax as they arrived in West Germany, but the birth of the Tartan Army coincided with the arrival of another baby for the Scottish game to handle: commercialism. Television was the game's new paymaster. The world would be watching. It was early days, but football was beginning to catch on about its showbiz appeal. From this day forth, they decreed, wherever there are goals, there'll be girls. Aloha. By comparison with today, the 1974 World Cup was a get-rich-slow scheme for the Scottish team. The Scottish press might have suggested that this was the start of a football Klondike, but when it came to making a few bob, the players couldn't even perform as stars in three stripes.
Everybody was to get, I think, something like £750 to £1,000 for wearing these boots.
We felt that we weren't getting, well, in many ways, our way. And enough for that particular deal.
Half the players wore Adidas anyway.
So eventually what we did, and it was quite funny because we cut all the markings off the boots and painted them black So everybody was wearing black boots.
Everybody had to sit with a wee razor blade taking the Adidas stripes off their boots.
I remember looking at the Brazilians, looking at their boots and saying, what kind of make of boots is that, you know what I mean? Is that a new Scottish make?
I wasn't interested in it, because I would have paid money to have been there.
As nice as it would have been, it wasn't important. What was important, the fact that we were there with a chance to win the World Cup.
And when the Strathclyde Police Pipe Band jumps out of a giant football, you just know the greatest show on earth has begun. Brazil had collected enough tokens to keep the old Jules Rimet trophy, and so the Scots were one of 16 teams playing for the new piece of jewellery. Scotland's first game was against Zaire, and in those days, African teams had no standing. In fact, some of our players probably didn't even know Zaire was in Africa. Manager Willie Ormond publicly acknowledged that scoring as many goals as possible would be the key to progress in the competition. Duh. Hopeful of having to use their fingers and toes to count the goals, the press and fans expected an avalanche. But as the team lined up, there was an unexpected nervousness on their faces.
I can always mind the tension before the game. Even the Billy Bremner, he was always lively, he was quiet. Dennis Law, he'd seen it all and done it all. Quiet. There was a tension, a real tension.
We had absolutely no idea tactically how they would play. We didn't know if any dossier had been done by the SFA. It was more what we were going to be doing.
I didn't know who Zaire was.
They were a pub team, basically. They hadn't got a clue. It was very early years for the African teams, and they really didn't have a clue.
But it wasn't as easy as we expected. It was difficult early stages in the game, but I felt once we got the first goal, we would go on and win it.
Jordan, and it's a goal! Keenan Lorimer.
It was a great relief as well, because albeit you think, yes, we'll beat them, you know, as the minutes are ticking by and you've not scored, you think, come on, we need a goal, you know, and the more they were holding out, the more aggressive they were getting.
The one thing I do remember at the game is the Zaire goalkeeper was hopeless, and maybe that's why Joe Jordan managed to score a goal.
And Jordan's there, and it's a goal!
It was a perfect start. I think if the fixture had been different, maybe it would have been the last game or the second game, we maybe could have looked at it differently. But if you're winning your first game in a World Cup section, you're on a roll, you've done well.
History had been made. Scotland's first ever victory at a World Cup finals. Joy of joys. Except, deep down, there was an uneasy feeling that somehow the team hadn't quite done enough, that they should have been more greedy for goals. Back home, the press were damn sure that they should have been. But it wouldn't matter as long as the Brazil-Yugoslavia match didn't end in a draw. It ended in a draw. Of course it did. But there was good news. The Scots were top of the section. The bad news arrived wearing yellow jerseys. Brazil, champions of the world. It was the game the nation had been waiting on. Thousands of Scots descended on Frankfurt for the highest profile match in the nation's history. I don't know what they thought about it as they sipped their caipirinhas in Rio, but over a half pint back in Glasgow, they were right up for the cup.
Right, we'll show you, you bandits. You're going to be playing against somebody that really, really cares.
Champions they may have been, but we didn't feel in any way inferior.
We expected to beat them.
Except someone forgot to hand the Brazilians a copy of the script.
Rivelino, though. Oh, what a save!
I don't think it was a fantastic save. I think it was quite lucky, to be honest. I remember thinking how lucky we were to get away with it. And yes, in the first 20 minutes they did have a lot of pressure.
Both teams looking slightly apprehensive at this moment, and there's Willie Morgan getting his first cracks of it.
I think in the first 20 minutes we found out that they're not as good as you think they are, and, you know, we're doing really, really well.
And then came that if-only moment, which defines the Scottish game. A split second which turns history. An instant which a certain generation play over and over again in their minds, saying, if only.
No, I remember it because I was involved in it, because I had a header, it came down, but I know the ball hit Billy.
To be honest, he didn't have time to react.
Oh, Billy Bremner!
It was a chance, but it wasn't a bad miss or anything like that.
What watch it again.
It was a half chance, and it happened all the time.
There's not much he really could do about that.
No, we played well. We could have won, probably should have won.
But we hadn't, so it was going to be all down to the last game.
It was a time to party, and goodness only knows the Scots are good at that. The toast was the team, the moment, and a place in the quarter-finals.
It was really the start of the Tartan Army. A huge amount of Scottish supporters went over to see the games.
You couldn't get anywhere at any of the grounds, but it was absolutely surrounded with them. Half of them had no tickets. They were just there to be there.
Well, the support for Scotland in Frankfurt today is quite fantastic.
That also gives you great encouragement to go forward.
The supporters were intoxicated with more than just the German beer. They had already decided that World Cup finals were their natural habitat, and even rival supporters and the German security services, understandably still edgy just 2 years after the terrorist attack at the Munich Olympics, agreed. Incredibly, only reporters from the BBC in London feared reprisals from the Scots.
Trouble could come from the Arabs, from the German Baader-Meinhof anarchists, and from the invading horde of Scots fans.
In truth, the only underground movement this lot knew about was the one that stopped at Partick and Govan. Perhaps they were worried the fans would inflict a sing-song on them. But there were genuine security fears, particularly after rumours of an IRA threat reached the team hotel just days before the crucial match against Yugoslavia.
Wherever we went in the building, we had to have police with us, and they all had guns. Even when we went to training, if we went to the matches, there was a helicopter with them sitting out the side of the helicopter with rifles.
Actually, the last game when we went to play Yugoslavia, there was a threat against the Scottish side, and it was quite nerve-wracking.
For us, it was a kind of a new experience, if you like, a bit of a laugh as well.
And well, that was Jimmy, because he was frightened to death then, because he said there could be snipers, there could be somebody. And he used to walk out with his Celtic bag. I play for Celtic. As if that was going to save him as well.
A win against Yugoslavia would guarantee the team a place in the quarter-finals. For those who could survive on a diet of ifs, buts and maybes, a draw might be good enough if Brazil didn't pummel Zaire under excuse for a goalie. It was a hot afternoon, the 22nd day of June. The confidence was as thick in the air as the humidity.
We'd beat them. We no doubt would beat them. We really thought that, we would qualify, we'd beat them and we'd qualify and go on to the later stages.
We knew we've got to go out and go at these and take the game to them and win, and we did that.
I had a great chance in about the first 20 minutes, and it came to my right foot, not my strongest.
It's hit Jordan!
I did know that I'd slipped up.
The goalkeeper was quick. Jordan shows there how close it was.
Scotland charged from the start, but then, in an instant, all seemed lost.
Awkward, yes! Barassi the scorer.
We went 1-0 down, which was heartbreak.
It was uphill for them because, again, they were physical, well organised, hard to break down.
Scotland almost certainly go out.
It was a mountain to climb.
For the Scots, the last order's bell had rung, and they were getting ready for the journey home. But could they squeeze in just one more for the road?
As we approach the final minute, Hay, Bremner, Morgan, Jordan, Lorimer, Hutchinson, number 18. Good play. Lorimer, Jordan, 1-8.
The game wasn't over.
We were well on top at the time and we threw everything at them.
Suddenly, it seemed to the players that Jordan's goal had changed everything. On the pitch, the last they had heard, Brazil had only been beating Zaire 2-0. If that scoreline was right, Scotland were through. They'd scored more goals than the Brazilians and would be in the quarter-finals of the World Cup.
Well, at first we thought somebody was just joking, they've only scored 2. We thought they were taking the mickey, but it wasn't.
We were on the pitch, we didn't know what was happening. And we just wanted to get the winner.
But in truth, the party was over. The celebrating players didn't realise that Brazil had already scored a third and crucial goal, courtesy of another mistake by that Zaire keeper. Damn his lack of talent. My wee sister could have saved that!
The keeper let in some crazy goal, didn't he? I'm sure they paid him. It was just really heartbreaking.
Brazil have won 3-0. Scotland must get a goal, and they're playing injury time.
Until the final whistle, we still believed, obviously, that we were going to get the winner and go through.
And it's gone. Scotland go out of the World Cup.
It didn't happen, and sadness overcame the team.
Dead. Just empty.
Tears with the lads. It was very sad, and the dressing room was silent, as you would expect.
I know it sounds stupid because it's far more important things in the world than a game of football, but how do you make it go away?
The thing is, if they could get a bus out of that dressing room to take them directly to Glasgow, I think everybody would have settled for that.
Lads like Billy and that, I think they knew that was their last chance.
I think those players knew, for them, that was it. That was the end.
We felt we'd let the supporters down because we should have done better. After the match, and then we went back to the hotel again and finished off the rest of the wine that they had there, whatever there was left in the hotel, and drowned our sorrows, as you would.
We just got smashed. That was it.
It was the curse of being Scottish. Unbeaten and unbowed. The first team in World Cup history to be knocked out without losing a match. Glorious failure? Scotland invented it. But this was a special kind of failure, and a nation embraced it. The Scotland team returned home, and a whole country gave them a big cuddle of consolation.
When we came back, I just couldn't believe the crowds that were at the airport. You'd have thought we'd have won the World Cup. It was tremendous.
Unfortunately, it would have been fantastic if we'd have gone further, but the fact that the people turned up in their numbers was their way of saying thank you, and it was, I must say, from my point of view, very much appreciated.
It was just incredible, unbelievable. People was at the airport, thronging the streets. All right, we've came back unbeaten, but we've won nothing.
Back in West Germany, believe it or not, they saw fit to carry on the competition without us. And a few serious football nations breathed a wee sigh of relief.
The other favourites, Holland, West Germany, Brazil themselves, mightily relieved when Scotland were eliminated.
No one else did what Scotland did that year. Even the cup-winning West Germans lost a game. The team had come so close, broke up quickly after the tournament. Denis Law, David Hay and Willie Morgan never again pulled on the dark blue jersey. Many of that team would play for Scotland again, but never at the World Cup. With Captain Billy Bremner's Scotland career coming to an inglorious end in 1975 after an incident in a Copenhagen bar. Gordon McQueen would gain many more caps for Scotland, but despite being in 2 World Cup squads, never played in the World Cup finals. Sandy Jardine, Martin Buchan and Danny McGrain would play in another World Cup, while Kenny Dalglish and Joe Jordan would play in another 2 finals. Jordan remains the only Scottish player to have scored at 3 World Cups. Willie Ormond left the Scotland job in 1977 and died in 1984. The team of 74 triggered a run which saw Scotland perform at 5 consecutive World Cup finals. But somehow, it was never quite the same again.
How far would Scotland have gone? Who knows?
If we had a wee bit of luck and had maybe played the Zaire game, no first but last, then I would say that Scotland were the best team in that group.
The fact that Scotland played them first, you didn't really know how many goals Brazil was going to score against them, or Yugoslavia for that matter.
The belief in the squad and the quality in the squad was good enough to win a World Cup. Now, whether we would have gone on and done it, you can never say.
It was one of the great times, certainly in my life. Everything surrounding it, it was great. Apart from getting eliminated without losing, that wasn't good.
To have been a part of that squad, it's just absolutely fantastic. Great memories and something that we'll all take to our graves with us.
It was one hell of a good team. Very proud to have been involved. Just proud.
The Hearts team of 20 years ago are remembered next Friday at 11:05 here on BBC One Scotland.